Hello, my name is Abdallah Reda. I'm a student in secondary 2. I'm Egyptian. Today we'll start to explain our subject of biology for this year. And our subject mainly consists of 11 chapters. The first 6 chapters are in the first unit, and it talks mainly about the biological processes that the living organisms carry out in order to continue their life. And the second unit contains the next 3 chapters, and it talks about inheritance and genetics. The third unit has only 2 chapters, and it talks about molecular biology and DNA. So today we'll start to explain our first chapter in Unit 1, and it's called Nutrition. This is the title of Chapter 1, and when we look at the word nutrition, it means feeding. So this chapter will deal with the ways that the living organisms use in order to obtain their own food, to get the energy in order to continue their life, carry out their vital processes, and repair their worn out tissues. Here in the first part of the chapter, we have a classification for the living organisms according to the ways of their nutrition. So, as we will see, we have 2 types of living organisms. The first type is called autotrophic. And the second type is called heterotrophic. First, we will talk about the autotrophic kind. So that the autotrophic living organisms is a living organism that doesn't depend on other living organisms in order to obtain its own food, and it manufactures its own food by itself. And we have here plants, here in this type of nutrition. So that plants use carbon dioxide, sunlight, water, and mineral salts in the soil, manufacture them inside their tissues to give high energy products such as starch, sugar, fats, and proteins. So here the plant is an autotrophic because it's a living organism that manufactures its food by itself and doesn't depend on any other living organisms for this aid. We go to the second type, which is the heterotrophic living organism, and this living organism depends on the bodies of other living organisms in order to obtain its food. And we can notice that some living organisms depend only on plants to obtain their own food, and others depend only on animals in order to obtain their food. And some of them depend on both of plants and animals in order to obtain their own food. So here we have 3 types of heterotrophic living organisms. Number 1 is called herbivorous. Here, because it depends on herbs or plants to obtain its own food. And we have here rabbits as an example for this type. The second one is called carnivorous. And this type depends on the animals and meat and flesh in order to obtain its own food, to get energy. And we get here lions for this type. And number 3 is called omnivorous. And this type depends on both of plants and animals in order to obtain its own food. And we get here humans as an example for this type. But these are not only the types of heterotrophic living organisms, because we can notice that some living organisms depend on dead bodies to get their own food, such as fungi and saprophytic bacteria. They depend on dead bodies in order to obtain their own food. So this kind here is called saprophytes. And we have also another type of living organisms which depends on harming another living organisms in order to obtain its own food, such as the Bilharzia worm. It leads to the death of its host in order to get food from it. So here we have Bilharzia, and this type is called a parasite. So here we have 5 sections for living organisms under the type heterotrophic, and we have here plants and some bacteria which have chlorophyll in order to use up the sunlight and other factors to obtain their own food without depending on another living organism. So there was an introduction for chapter 1 in biology, and the next time we will talk about the plants first and the ways of obtaining their food. We will talk about the processes that the plant carry out in order to obtain its food. We'll talk about the absorption and photosynthesis process. And that's all for today, and thank you for watching. See you next time.